Welcome to MacGyver's Workshop, where you never know what we're going to be working on next. If you're not too careful, you just might learn something.
Hi there, and welcome to another episode of MacGyver's Workshop, where you never know what we're going to be working on next, and if you're not too careful, you just might learn something. So today, what we're working on is a 2012 Hyundai Sonata. It's one of my regulars, and she's been having this weird intermittent check engine light that pops on, and by the time she either gets it to the dealer or to me, then the light goes off and there's no history. She's had it back to the dealer because it recently had a engine replacement. I don't know what you want to call it, a recall or TSB or whatever. But fairly recently they just put a new motor in it for her. And after that it started having these random check engine lights, and it was really kind of driving her batty because, you know, of course, speculation. It's like, okay, if it comes and goes, there's no history, maybe it's a gas cap code. So she put a new gas cap on it, and coincidentally, you know, the light stayed off for a while, but then he came back on again. And finally we caught it, and it's the transmission temperature sensor. And apparently that's a thing with these. And so what we've got is today we're going to change out this transmission temperature sensor, and we're also going to do it the proper way, whereas you put the updated harness in, because the sensor is made onto the harness. So it's not like you can just change the sensor. I think in some of the earlier models maybe you could have, but this one, it all comes with the harness that hooks onto all the little solenoid valves and everything. So we've got that. We've got our little tranny pan gasket. We've got motor oil and filter. We're going to go ahead and change the oil while we got it in here. So let's get started. All right, to start with, we are going to remove the battery. And you have to realize you're going to wipe out all the radio memory when you do that. And you're going to wipe out any computer codes that were stored in here, and it's going to reset the drive cycle monitors. So just be wary of that. And then there's another 12mm bolt down in there that we can get at to get this battery out. But before we do that, I'm going to take this air intake off of here, and that way that'll give us a little more jiggle room to work down here. And who knows, we may get lucky, we may not have to pull the battery out. We may have enough room to get at that connector on the top. I can't be that lucky now. That would just be right out. That couldn't possibly happen. You see that connector right there? That has to get undone. And then there's that little bolt right next to it. That has to get undone as well. Yeah, it's just a whole lot. It's a whole lot nicer and easier if you move the air box and the battery out of the way. And it just allows that to pop off of there nice and easy peasy. And then we'll go after this other bolt right here, and this bracket will slide out, and it'll allow that connector to slide back down into the transmission. So we get that 10mm bolt out of there.
That way we get our little, it's like a little Y bracket that holds that thing in place. And then this will push right on down through the transmission and come out the bottom.
The part we're going to have to get at is, thankfully, on the front of the transmission facing the front of the car. Most of the time your valve bodies are on the side, hidden behind a mount and everything, and you got to put a cradle on there to hold it up and all that, and it's a royal pain in the butt. But this one is not so bad, and we just have to take this cover off down here, and we'll be able to see what we're working on. Got a bunch of these little bolts everywhere. 10 millimeter is the socket size. And thankfully this is a Southern car, so we don't have rust to deal with. But in addition to your 10 millimeter bolts, you can also have a Phillips head right there. And one little oddball. And one little lone oddball screw holding everything together in there. There are a couple of them, I think, actually. Yeah, so you gotta have two of them. You have one right here, and you can just kind of hold your head up under here like so, and that'll keep everything from falling on you. Unless I'm missing something else here. I don't think I am. Oh, so you have to finagle it out of the way just a smidge. So we'll chuck this over here, out of the way. God, I love a clean car that's not totally submerged in spooge. But since we're going to be changing fluid anyway, we're going to go ahead and drain our fluid out here, and we'll get a look and see, you know, how dirty it is. And then once we get all our fluid drained out, then we got our 10 millimeter bolts that hold this pan on. I know not everyone has obviously has a lift in their shop, or would have one of these big roll around drain buckets. However, you know, this is definitely doable on the ground or on a set of ramps. But what is highly recommended is one of these, I call them shit can lids, but it's like a giant funnel that sits on top of the already large funnel that would be on your drain pan or what have you, and catches everything on a much wider area. So you get these things for a few bucks. My son actually bought that for me for Christmas one year, a few years back, and you know, it means the world to me. I love this thing, and it's real handy and helps keep from making a heck of a mess. So your drain on this is actually a 24 millimeter, and if you're not into metric and you're more America, then that's going to translate to a 15/16, which will fit it nicely. The interesting thing about this style of transmission is this is another one of those lifetime trannies where it doesn't have a replaceable filter inside or anything like that. You'll see there's no bottom pan. However, at least nice thing is they do give you a drain plug, so you can at least, you know, drain and change the fluid. So it just has a screen inside, and the plug has a magnet on the end of it. So we're going to go ahead and pop this thing loose here, and I'm going to get my my shop rag at the ready, because you'll always get fluid all over you every time, never fails. And we're going to pay careful attention to how bad this fluid looks coming out of here. It should be a transparent red color, but if this is the original fluid, it's probably going to be pretty brown, which it is. And I'm going to shine my light through it, and yeah, it's pretty brown, but you know, that is not such a terrible thing. But one thing you do want to look at is the magnet on the end of this plug. And given the mileage on this, it's not too bad. There's just a little tiny bit of metallic dust on this magnet, and that's fine. This is not bad. And you know, our problem here is electrical, it's not mechanical. You know, we're not talking about any burnt clutches or anything like that. But, you know, it just goes to show, you know, that tranny fluid definitely does need to be changed. I don't believe in this whole lifetime fluid thing, because then when your tranny burns up and you're like, well, okay, that was a tranny's lifetime. Just makes you want to slap somebody, don't it? So there we have that, and we don't have a whole lot of room up here to get at this with my little zip gun here, so I'm going to get a ratchet, my little short stubby ratchet, and we'll use that and get this front pan off of here. So what I have here is my little flexi head ratchet, and it's got a 3/8 head on one side and a 1/4 inch on the other, and it flexes. And I'll tell you, I love this thing, and I wish I could remember where I got it, because if I could find another one, I'd buy another one just to keep for whenever this one finally breaks. But I can't tell you how long I've had this thing. So while that's draining, we're just going to let that go and keep draining, because it's not in our way right now. And we'll just break these loose. And you shouldn't have to fight them. They should break loose and then just pretty much spin. Alright, so we're going to have a little bit of boring stuff here, because there's a bunch of little brackets and nitnoid stuff I got to take out up top out of sight here. And also, of course, I've got 18 of these pan bolts I got to take out by hand. So we'll be working on that for a minute. I'm sure you don't want to watch me do that. Yeah, some of these pan bolts here, especially the ones up at the top that are hiding under the transmission cooler lines, you know, they're going to put up a fight and make you want to say some bad words. But keep the faith, and you'll get them. You'll get them. And remember too, this is a plastic pan, so my suggestion would be to do this with the engine. Oh, bumped my camera, sorry. Do this with the engine overnight cold, so you don't risk warping that plastic pan, because then it may not seal good when you go to put it back on again. So, but that's just my 2 cents worth. I know the dealer labor guide quotes 3 hours for this replacement of this harness, and that's usually, those estimates are usually very optimistic. So I anticipate this being probably at least a 3-hour job, if not longer, because once you get in there, then you got to mess around in the valve body and all that to get that harness out of there. So I'm sure that's not going to be fun. Well, we'll see. Alrighty, so we're down to our last pan bolt here. We'll have to recount them. I'm not sure if it was 18, 19, 20, something like that. Anyway, there's a bunch of them. And then be ready for spillage. Make sure you got your big giant funnel pan here ready to catch anything. Shouldn't be a whole lot coming out of there. All right. Now you've got a vent hose up at the top here, which I opted to try to leave it on there. So maybe it'll kind of hold on to this pan and keep it out of harm's way. Don't know. I may still have to go in there after it and disconnect it. And I can see my wiring harness here, or at least part of it. I'm gonna have to reposition some lights and stuff so y'all can see what I'm messing with up in here. But I'm gonna go ahead and put this drain plug back in the bottom here, since we're pretty much done with that. We'll go ahead and snug that back up so we don't forget about it. Don't meet on it too much. Remember, you are screwing into aluminum there. So let me reposition my lights and everything so we can see a little better here. All right, now the sensor we're going after is this right here, but it's part of this whole harness right here that hooks to all your shift solenoids and control solenoids and things like that. So we're gonna have to get that out, and then also we gotta pull it out from the top of the connector on the top of the transmission, because it all has to come out in one piece. And I do have to apologize. This is really tough to get a good set of eyes on here, but if you're changing out the whole harness, you actually have to remove the valve body, and there's a bunch of 10mm bolts that hold the sensor in and hold the harness in. We got to get those out first. So we'll start with those guys. We'll start with our sensor first here. Now, since we're dealing with stuff that's inside the transmission, okay, we're going to get us something nice and clean to put these bolts in. Now we want to very gently massage this harness off, because it's connected to all these solenoids here. So just be very, very gentle as you're taking this off. To disconnect it from all these little solenoids here. And once we get that loose, and there's another connector up top side here and another 10mm bolt, but we've got to get the valve body out of the way before we can get to that. And of course, naturally, there was one extra bolt, and you want to be careful of it because it's slightly longer than the rest of them. But then when you get it out, make sure you got your drain pan there, because you're gonna lose a lot of fluid. And then drop this valve body down and be real careful, because you got other stuff in there that you gotta watch out for. And make sure you got something nice and clean to lay this on. Something preferably lint-free. All right. Now we got our harness back in place. Now we can put our valve body back in. And one of your bolts is longer than the rest. So
You have to be real careful with that. And remember, when you stand this up, you're going to have more fluid fall out. And then you've got your manual valve right here that has to seat up in to that manual lever up top. So it's going to take a little bit of finagling to get everything in there. Plus you got to keep the harness up and out of your way until you get this in there. And you're probably going to get some tranny fluid on you. But it's all part of the game. Now I'm going to go ahead and stick my one long bolt through here. So just so it's there and ready to rock and roll. And then I'm going to go by feel here and get my manual lever set in here. It's going to take a little bit of finagle, but that's okay because you don't want to rush this part. You want to take it nice and slow. And you'll feel it when she goes in. She'll line up right where she needs to go. Yep, and there she goes. The skadunk of success. And then if you start this one long bolt, that'll hold everything in place while you get everything else started in there. Because by now your arms are going to be tired from holding that heavy valve body up there. And then from here on out, really, it's pretty much just the reverse of disassembly. You know, the tricky bits was being real careful with that electrical harness and getting it out of there. And of course, going back in with it, we're going to have to be gentle with it. But other than that, and being careful with all our plastic connectors because, you know, they may be brittle and fragile, depending on how many miles your car has on it. And so I'm going to bolt the valve body back in. And you see, you got 8 bolts, 3 on one side, 5 on the other, and one of those 5 over here is longer than the rest of them. And you don't want to put that in the wrong hole because it'll bottom out. And then the one that goes in the hole that needs the long one, you know, the screw won't be long enough for the bolt. So, all in all, you know, it's a pretty involved job. You know, I don't think too much of it really. It's not a huge deal for me, but, you know, if you're real careful and you pay attention, you know, you can do this yourself. And it was a pretty astronomical amount of money that my friend said that they wanted at the Hyundai dealer. And, you know, she's just had so many problems with this car that she's just loath to, you know, dump that kind of money into it. And, you know, she says she's going to trade it one day, but, you know, if it's driving and you don't have a car payment, you know, it's hard to justify it. And then when it breaks down on you again, then you're like, ah, screw this, I'm going to trade it. So, I know the feeling. I got the same situation with that Mercedes of mine, that stupid hybrid capacitor thing. So,
But it's just such a beautiful car, and it's so comfy, and it fits me so nice. Because I'm a big guy, I'm a tall guy. I have a hard time getting in and out of something like this. Anyway, I'm gonna button all this back up, and then we're gonna change the oil, and then we'll fire it up, make sure it goes into all the gears, and you know, make sure that check engine light stays out. So our pan gasket is kind of neat, and it's kind of like a rubber ring that slips down into a groove. It's really a good design. I kind of like it. You don't have to worry about over squishing the gasket, and it's got metal collars in there to keep you from over tightening. So, which isn't a guarantee. You can still over tighten them if you get real hand fisted with it, but for the most part, it's a really good design. Alrighty, now it's time for our boring 19 pan bolts. We go back in. It's always loads of fun. Usually it's a good idea to just start two center ones in the pan there, and that'll hold everything in place. And then start all the rest of your bolts, but don't tighten any of them until you get all of them started. Otherwise you're going to find that last one ain't going to want to go in. One thing that's really important as you're bolting this plastic pan back in is when you snug them down, snug all the bolts down, just very gently at first. And then you'll notice when you go back over them again that you know, you snug them a little more, then you know, the rest of them get really loose. So you really want to tighten these things down in 3 steps, and then, you know, use like a cross pattern, and make sure you draw that pan down nice and even, because you don't want to crack it. Like I say, it is plastic, and over time these plastic pans can get brittle, and you don't want to be wrenching on one of these things and tightening one bolt all the way down and none of the rest of them are snug, and you're going to hear that terrible sound of that pan cracking, and that's going to ruin your day. So now I'm ready to go over my 3rd step, which is where I put the final torque to them, and we'll be done with that bit anyway. And then we'll spray around here with some carbon choke cleaner to get off any of the transmission fluid that's kind of leaked and dribbled everywhere. Get it all nice and clean. And we'll drain our oil, put our new filter on, and button the bottom up, and then go back up top side, put our battery and our air box back in, and fill her up with oil, and fire it up and check the computer, and then it'll be time for a test drive, which I won't do that till tomorrow because it's getting kind of late at night. But alrighty, time for the oil change. This filter off in here, and let's see. Filter drain out a bit. And let's see what size bolt we got in our oil pan here. Let's see, you got a 15 or a 17. Hey, 17, how about that? Messy. Messy. All right, now Of course, you always want to rub a little tiny bit of oil on the gasket. But here's another little trick. Reduce strain on the motor as far as running without oil. If your filter goes up, straight up and down like that, then you can fill it up with oil, or at least most of the way anyway, before you put it up in there. And that's less time the motor's got to spend trying to pump oil through the motor if the filter's already got some oil in it. So we're gonna pour some oil in this filter and get her going here. Get as much of it in there as we can. Anywho, and of course you want to go ahead and make sure you wipe off any of the oil that's done dribbled out everywhere from where you took the old filter out. Get that on up in there. All right, we got our oil filter in there good and snug, but not too snug. You don't want to lock it in there so tight that you can't ever get it off next time. And then before I go any further, I always double check my drain plug. Make sure I got it on there nice and tight. Don't want that thing falling out on it. That would be embarrassing. And clean up our mess. And then I'm gonna done sprayed this with carbon choke cleaner, so it's got any oil residue cleared off of there. Now we're gonna put our shield up in here. Now see, once you get them two Phillips head screws lined up, then everything else will go right in where it needs to be. But again, never tighten anything all the way until you get all your bolts in. I always make sure I get all my bolts started first before I tighten anything up final. That way you're good and sure everything's going together just right. we got her cranked up and going. The one last thing you want to do, and I didn't have time to film it tonight because it's like 10:30. It's time for bed, past my bedtime. But you want to hook your scan tool up to it and make sure that, you know, the codes are clear and they stay gone. Probably want to drive it around a good bit and make sure the code doesn't come back, and read your live data, read the temperature that it's showing off of that sensor, and make sure that it's reading correctly. As you're warming it up from a cold start, you know, it should get up to around 120, 130 degrees, and you know, take it out and drive it, read your live data, and make sure that it's, you know, your temperature's moving around like it should. And I will say this, these things are incredibly difficult to fill with fluid. A little plug on the top of the pan doesn't let a whole lot of fluid through at one time, and then it constantly tries to burp and all that because it's not vented very well. So it took a long time to put 5.5 quarts of fluid back in it. And it's actually kind of like a BMW, you know, when in order to check the level of the fluid, you know, there's a plug on the side of the pan that you open up with the motor running, and the fluid should be just right at where that hole is, maybe dribbling out a little bit, and that way you know your fluid level's correct. But it has to be done with the engine running and in park, not, you know, shut off, because then of course it'll back up and all your fluid will run out. So anyway, that's how you change that bloody harness in a 2012 Hyundai. And please subscribe. Feel free to comment. You know, we look forward to everyone's critique. If I miss something, call me out on it. And also, if you have any questions, you can always email me at MacGyversWorkshop@gmail.com. And I'm going to head back in the house and call it a night. So, see ya.